Hi everyone, my name's Josh Biddick, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Kinda Funny Weekly Review. With this show, we break down the Kinda Funny content that comes out Monday through Friday, break it into more digestible chunks, that way if you're not able to watch all the content, you're still able to be informed. Now, before we get started with the show, I want to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget, this is the last week to be able to participate in the Kinda Funny 4.0 fundraiser. If you go to patreon.com/kindafunny or patreon.com/kindafunnygames, any new pledge or increased pledge is going to go towards helping create new shows, increase the Kinda Funny World Tour, potentially legally change Cool Greg's name to Cool Greg, which is going to be fantastic, and even in the future, help hire new employees and a brand new studio. So, make sure you head over there and check it out. Now, without further ado, let's get started with the show. Alright, starting off this week with Monday, we've got Kinda Funny Games Daily. Hosts today are Greg Miller, and he is joined by the hair, Fran Mirabella. To start off the show as always, we have the Roper Report. First story comes from us from Laura Kate Dale over at Kotaku, discussing the Anthem demo versus what's actually going to be in the final product. Next up, we have the Overkill's The Walking Dead could be dead on consoles, says Wesley Yinpool over at Eurogamer. Some more Fortnite news comes to us in the form of Fortnite on Ice, and this comes to us from Kevin over at GameStop. And the last story today is that Forza had a milestone of having 7 million people play the Fortune Island expansion, and that comes from their Twitter account. With the Roper Report all wrapped up, it's time to move on to reader mail. The question I want to highlight comes from Will, asking if our hosts think Assassin's Creed Odyssey's world is too big. Now personally, I'm playing the game right now and the world is absolutely massive. There's so much to do. I'm about 50-60 hours into the game and I don't even feel like I'm halfway done. Now I think that it shows more to this game having so much to do that it's just one of those things where you're always going to be coming back to it, and it's so much content for the money you made. I think it's a lot of bang for the buck. Personally, I think it's great. For Squad Up this week, we have Alex Williams, who is looking for people to play Switch with. His Switch code is 460537579004. Again, that's 460537579004. He particularly wants someone to help him train in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now that's all for Games Daily, and it's time to check in with the Gamescast. Hosts this week are Tim, Greg, Jared, and Fran. The show starts as always with what everyone's been playing. Tim starts off by talking about playing the Onimusha HD Remaster. The conversation moved towards the Resident Evil 2 remake, which both Greg and Tim have been playing. After this, we talk about what Fran has been playing, and he's finally beaten Red Dead Redemption, and Gris to top that. Fran and Greg also talk about playing the game Hades. Greg also talks about playing The Walking Dead Final Season Episode 2, as well as Y2K on Switch, and Bury Me My Love, which Jared has also been playing. This transitions into Jared, who's also played Ding Dong XL as well as Dusk. And finally, the big topic of the show, predictions of where video games would be in 2021. Now, the conversation moves, it's a little fluid, not everyone having the same amount of opinions. Tim interjects with a whole bunch of opinions, especially when he agrees with other people's topics. So here's Tim's list. He thinks that the Switch will have at least 2 revisions, leading them to sell more units than the Xbox and 3DS. Tim thinks there will be streamlined games as services, like Xbox's Game Pass or Games for Gold, basically thinking there'll be one condensed unit. He thinks that Microsoft will buy Gearbox. PlayStation will let you play both PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 games on the same unit. He thinks that Final Fantasy VII Remake will be coming out, and that we'll see less coming from VR. Jared's 3 are that Half-Life 3 will be announced. He thinks that Death Stranding will be a great game, but it won't change the way video games have been made at all. It's not going to be something world-changing. He thinks that Fortnite will still be the #1 game streamed on Twitch. Fran thinks there will be more gaming subscriptions, such as what we see with EA. He thinks that Apple will get into gaming. Nintendo will announce a core mobile game, and that Bungie will still be indie. Greg thinks that Gearbox will either be out of business or bought by someone. He thinks Xbox will be the talk of the town, much like PlayStation is with the current console generation. He also thinks that Disney will get out of their Star Wars deal with EA and potentially become an Xbox exclusive. Now that's all for the Gamescast. It's time to go a little more relaxed with the Internet Explorers. First off, as always, is in other news. Tim breaks everyone's mind when he tells everyone he's learned the phrase, "you've got another thing coming," is actually, "you've got another think coming. The next story is Cool Greg's tweet at Trump for throwing shade at San Francisco. They move on to a story of police seizing an illegal alligator in a New York City home. More animal news stories come in the way of a man trying to smuggle a snake onto an airplane by hiding it in his pants. And the craziness doesn't stop there when a woman twerks on top of a moving car down a Mississippi highway. Next up is a tweet that comes from Mina Kimes tweeting out "Go for it, Andy," in reference to a football game. But this just led the internet ablaze as they tweeted a bunch of "Go for it Knicks," tying it all back to the hit game Connect between 3 and 5. Lastly, at the time of recording Internet Explorers, there was 186 days left until the Hobbs and Shaw movie. Now it's time for Tim Wants to Show Nick Stuff. Matt O'Rourbeck on the Kinda Funny Reddit posted a bunch of pictures of the Kinda Funny alter egos that he made in WWE 2K19. Tim then shows Nick a video of a pigeon dancing on the street as a street performer plays in the song. Next up is a video from best friend Chloe of General Grievous, and it's pretty great. It's really funny. You've probably seen it floating around. I think it actually became a TikTok ad. And now it's time for Tim Shows You Stuff. This week, Mega Ran's 2018 video game wrap-up rap. You can go get the song over on patreon.com/bitsandrhyme. Tim now introduces a new segment called Sweet Nasty Love. Tim shows a video of a guy dancing and motivational kind words popping up. And this is your reminder to tweet some sweet nasty love to someone you know and care about. Because guess what? They could use it. We return to zergnet.com for more clickbait. This week's clickbait is Catherine Zeta-Jones' stunning daughter is basically her twin. This article is 10 pages, and the daughter doesn't really come close to twin-like. Moving right along, it's time for Barrett to show us what Facebook algorithm shirt he's wearing. It's a nice mix match of the Hard Rock Cafe with the Mos Eisley Cantina. With Barrett getting the approval for his shirt, it's time to move on to Fun Clips. After Fun Clips, Tim teaches us the word of the day, prognosticator. A person who foretells or prophesizes a future event. Before the explorers leave us, they tell us the top 10 searches on Pornhub in 2018. First up is Stormy Daniels, followed by Fortnite, 4K, romantic, trans, outdoor, tattoos, Tinder, Bowsette, and finally, threesomes. There are a few gaming topics on the list, so I guess hats off to gamers, or pants off? I don't know. Anyways, after this list, we go to chat room, and then we end the show. That's it for Monday. Let's go over to Tuesday. Tuesday starts off with always is Kinda Funny Games Daily, where hosts are Greg Miller and Witta Wednesday coming early this week with Gary Witta. Now Andrea was supposed to host this episode, but she had to go and play Anthem, so Mr. Witta came to save the day. We have a shorter Roper report this week. First up, Resident Evil 2 Remake gets post-launch DLC mode, says Steve Watts of GameSpot. Matt Handrahan over at GamesIndustry.biz writes that Square Enix has trademarked HD 2D, which refers to their game Octopath Traveler. Wrapping up the Roper Report is Rebecca Valentine of GamesIndustry.biz. She says that StackUp has gotten a grant from the CDC to help increase its research on mental health care for veterans. For Reader Mail this week, I want to highlight a question from AJ from Seattle, who wants to know if Sony and Media Molecule could be setting themselves up for legal trouble with users creating rip-offs of other companies' IPs in dreams. Lastly, we have Squad Up with Adam Neely looking for help in PC with EA Origin. Wants some friends to play Anthem with. You can look him up as Adam Neely. That's ATOMNEELY. It's all one word. This wraps up Games Daily, and it's time to get fast and furious with Kinda Funny in Review. We're back with another episode of In Review, and this week the boys are covering Too Fast, Too Furious, and the boys are hungry. They start off with their first impressions of the movie and how much they liked or disliked it. Starting off some facts of the Furious, we have that the director, John Singleton, encouraged actors to just improvise a lot of the script, and I think it's pretty apparent. Before getting into the recap of the movie, they talk about the after-credit scene and how it was absolutely horrible and didn't make much sense with the rest of the movie. Now we get ready for Greg to do his damnedest to explain the plot of this movie. We get Rank Those Abs pretty quick this week with Paul Walker's abs, and they're ranked to start as alright. Now we see Tyrese shirtless, which bumps him to the #1 spot on Rank Those Abs list, followed by Paul Walker and then Vin Diesel at number 3. Now when they wrap up the story, of course it's time to move on to Ragu Bagu, where rad guys talk bad guys. Today the rad guys are ranking this movie's villain, Carter. They agree on how bad Carter is, and they put him at the absolute bottom in slot number 8. So right now the list for Ragu Baggy goes number 1, Johnny Tran, and number 8, Carter. Now it's time to move on to Haiku in Review. A lot of stellar haikus came out. One example I want to highlight is Mechanist Shadow 12, and he writes, "Smack that ass, Suki. I will take my cutter back. Nah, cuz, we hungry." Now it's time to rank the movies. Number 1 is The Fast and the Furious, followed by number 2, Too Fast, Too Furious. Next week's episode is Tokyo Drift with extra credit, Better Luck Tomorrow. This wraps up Tuesday, so now we're going to move on over to Wednesday. Starting off Wednesday, of course, we have more Kinda Funny Games Daily. Hosts for this episode are Greg, and returning from her Anthem playing is the busiest lady in the business, Andrea Renee. Now, Andrea can't talk about what she played due to an embargo, so we're going to jump right into the Roper Report. The Entertainment Software Association reports that the US video game sales reached record-breaking sales of $43.4 billion. Matt Piscatella of GameSpot writes that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has smashed records of physical sales alone. Phil of GameSpot has more video game numbers when he tells readers that the Switch sold more consoles this year than any other console in the US. Adam Bankhurst of IGN writes a wrap-up of the Nintendo Nindies highlight. And the last story of the Roper Report comes from the people of Farming Simulator, announcing that there will be a Farming Simulator League, which will be a full-fledged esport league. For reader mail this week, I'm highlighting a question that comes from Ryan, aka Rocky1982, who wants to know, in regards to video game addiction in children, who should be responsible? The government, the parents, or the game producers themselves? Wrapping up the show, we have Squad Up, where Joey Washburn is looking for some people to help him play The Division on PS4. His PSN name is Washburn135. So, go help him out and get ready for Division 2. That's all for Kinda Funny Games Daily. It's time to head over to the greatest show on the internet, KFAF. With KFAF this week, Andy and Nick are back to lead us through a roller coaster of a show. The first segment is the third move of the best game on the internet, Connect Between 3 and 5. An amazing block is made by Andy, but we will have to wait and see what happens next in the game next week. Moving on. As we know of Andy, he is a huge fan of The Office, and with the announcement of Netflix's show Space Force, done by the creator of The Office and Steve Carell, Andy wants to try to get on the show. So he does a pre-recorded bit of remade scenes from The Office, throwing in the word Space Force to make it parody. Now it's time to see the results of last week's Photoshop challenge. Last week, of course, you were asked to put Andy into any fantasy film poster. The winner this week is Madison Prest, all over on Twitter at Madison Prest. So congratulations, you did a wonderful job. Go give some sweet nasty love on Twitter. To submit next week, tweet at KindaFunnyVids using the hashtag KFAF by Monday. Next week's theme is WWE. You need to put Cool Greg or Greg Miller into some WWE themed pictures. And don't forget, if you win, your submission will go on the wall. So good luck photoshopping. Next up, Nick wants to celebrate National Pie Day and National Compliment Day. Nick has everyone who is available in the office come and have a slice of pie, and then he and Andy will give them compliments. The compliments are very Nick and Andy, so maybe you should take the time to give real compliments to the KF team. To finish the third episode ever of KFAF, we have Ask Andy Anything. Andy gives weird answers that only he can give, and everyone kind of leaves with more questions than they started with. That wraps up Wednesday. Time to move along over to Thursday. To start off Thursday, we have Kinda Funny Games Daily, where Greg is joined by Game Informer's EIC Andy McNamara. To start the show, we have the Roper Report. First up is that Kingdom Hearts 3's review embargo is up, so all those reviews are flooding in. Imran Khan of Game Informer reports that Fallout 76 won't be going free to play anytime soon. The final story of the Roper Report comes from Sabana Arif over at IGN, stating that the PUBG Lite beta has started. It'll be a free-to-play game that will work on lower-end machines. Now it's time for reader mail. We have some pretty strong questions for this episode, but I wanted to highlight one for the guest, Andy McNamara. Blackjack asks Andy, while being the EIC at Game Informer, does he ever miss playing and reviewing games? It's really cool to hear what Andy has to say, so if you don't have time to check out the whole episode, I would recommend checking out his answer. You can find the question timestamped in the description of that episode of Games Daily. Wrapping up the show, we have Squad Up. Brian is looking for some best friends to play Anthem and Division 2, but he also wants to try other online games. You can find him on Xbox with the gamer tag EVERATE. That's all for Kinda Funny Games Daily, so it's time to move on to Debatable. The topic of debate this week is the top 10 PS4 games, with debaters Greg Miller and GameSpot's Lucy James. Big news comes right off the bat with Debatable that Jared has announced he will be leaving Kinda Funny. Now Jared has an amazing opportunity to go work for a group called Free Association. Now if you want more details, go over to Jared's Patreon, patreon.com/JaredLay. Now with what could be considered the show's housekeeping out of the way, let's get on to the show. The games Lucy brings to the table: Until Dawn, Bloodborne, Persona 5, Shadow of the Colossus, Tetris Effect, and when she spins the wheel, she must argue for Ron, who has picked What Remains of Edith Finch. Greg's comes to the table with starting out swinging, he puts the #1 spot of God of War. The rest of Greg's list is Horizon Zero Dawn, My Name is Mayo, Spider-Man, Astrobot Rescue Mission, and then Greg spins the wheel and lands on Zack, and he has to argue for Red Dead Redemption 2. Now we're moving on to the Vita Veto. The question that has to be answered by Lucy is how many Naughty Dog titles have been released on PS4? That question comes from Sushi Girl Ali. Lucy gets the answer right and vetoes Red Dead Redemption 2 and replaces it with Edith Finch. The last thing we do is the final countdown. Greg fights to get Persona 5 as number 1 to solidify and get more points in the top 5. Lucy counters trying to steal God of War. Her counter argument is successful and she wins God of War, which then in turn wins her this episode of Debatable. Lucy makes a compelling argument and steals God of War, also the victory from Greg. Lucy James is the winner of this episode of Debatable. The final list is as follows: number 10, Red Dead Redemption 2, 9, Horizon Zero Dawn, 8, Astrobot, 7, Tetris Effect, 6, Shadow of the Colossus, 5, Spider-Man, 4, Bloodborne, 3, Edith Finch, 2, Persona 5, and 1, God of War. And with that, we are wrapped up on Jared's final episode as host of Debatable. Rounding out Thursday, we have Party Mode. This week, Andy, Tim, Nick, and Greg sit down to play 5v5 Squad Strike in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's a vicious battle of 1v1 as we try to see who is the best in the office. That's all for Thursday this week. Time to move on the final day of Friday. The final day of content starts off as always with Kinda Funny Games Daily. Hosts this week are Greg Miller and for the first time ever, Joseph Newt, a very skilled freelance games journalist. The show starts off with what is and forever will be the Roper Report. Starting off the Roper Report is a story from Adam Bankhurst that announces Retro will be developing the new Metroid Prime 4 game. The next story on the Roper Report is that GLAD Media announces their GLAD Media Game Awards nominations and comments on the Assassin's Creed DLC issue with the relationship options. James Batchelor of GamesIndustry.biz reports that Remy Ishmael will be launching a new games developer conference for developers all around the world, and where no one has to leave their desks. The next big story comes from Brian Gashinte of Variety, where he writes that Fortnite will be killing loot boxes. Fallout 76 will be getting a new PvP mode, and that news comes to us from Ethan Gosh over at Kotaku. And the final story of the Roper Report is that Resident Evil is getting a show and is in development over at Netflix. With only 2 questions for reader mail, I figured I'd highlight them both. Jackie B asks if the unanimously positive reviews of Kingdom Hearts 3 are a surprise to our hosts. And Blackjack is back wondering why Sony is hiding metadata from us. To wrap up this episode of Games Daily for the week, we have Squad Up, where Stephen Clifford is looking for some best friends to play with and to try to get over being antisocial and having a hard time talking to people. His Xbox gamer tag is Rickety Cricket. That's Rickety Cricket 16. I'm just gonna put that up on the screen. His PSN is Wampa Wamper. WAMPAWAMPER. So go over and help out this fellow best friend. With Kinda Funny Games Day squared away, it's time to head over to Screencast. The boys are back and they're talking some entertainment. We have Tim, Nick, and the best new host of Kinda Funny, Kevin Coelho. First up as always is the news. The first story being talked about is the new Amazon Prime show, The Boys, which got its trailer, and it's based off a comic book. Next up on the docket is, again, the Resident Evil TV series that's going to be on Netflix. Everyone kind of agrees that it would probably be better as an animated series, much like Castlevania. Moving on, we learn that Matt Smith will co-star with Jared Leto in the Sony Marvel movie Morbius. The Lego Batman movie director teams up with Netflix for Miller World adaptation Reborn. Vin Diesel announces that there will be another Fast and Furious spin-off that will be with a female-led protagonist. The final story of news is that the final episodes of Game of Thrones have had their runtime leaked. With the news wrapped up, it's time to move over to the topic of the show. The Oscars are bullshit. The boys sit down and they talk a bit about what goes into a film really getting an Oscar and how it isn't based just on merit. They are talking primarily from points and information made from a Philip DeFranco video that explains the process of Oscar nominations and how certain categories are won. Now we're moving on to the segment Bronze Tier. But for next week, Kevin wants patrons at the Bronze Tier or above to go to patreon.com/kindafunny and tell him what of the 8 movies should win the Oscar, and this will be the first ever Screencast Oscar People's Choice Award. Kevin then reads what members wrote him last week on what to watch. DJ Kento told Kevin to watch A Simple Favor. Sean suggested Punisher Season 2, which Kevin started and watched 6 episodes of. Jake Cotrain throws out Upgrade, and the last one comes from Matt Rohrbach, and it is Serenity. Now it's time to wrap up the show with Out This Week. Out on Amazon Prime is Fahrenheit 11/9. Netflix has A Conversation with the Killer and Hotel Transylvania 3. For theatrical releases, there wasn't really anything that Kevin wanted to highlight. Now I think this is another great episode from Kevin. I'm always going to throw in props here. He's getting better with each episode. I think you can really tell he did a good job of taking control of the show when he needed to. Time to finish out this week with the Kinda Funny podcast. So my favorite game is how long does it take to start the show? This episode takes the cake with the intro done at 22 minutes into the podcast. That's right, it's 22 minutes of crazy random conversations before the actual official start of the show. So I'm going to actually shorten how I do the recap for the Kinda Funny podcast today. We're going to try something a little new. Normally I will summarize every single conversation that happens, trying to lump everything together, but really that feels like it's just too long. And I'm going to try to get it down to the core information. We're going to basically hit the big topics that are listed in the episode's description. That way you kind of have a general idea of what the whole episode's about. But of course, as always with the Kinda Funny podcast, it is a roller coaster of random conversations. Whatever can come up, will come up, and we never really know what direction it's going to go in. First up, the host this week, we have Greg, Andy, and Nick. First topic of the show comes from Greg talking about his experience hosting the Star Trek Discovery red carpet premiere and Greg's newfound love of Star Trek. The next topic of conversation is Andy having to cancel his credit card. On last week's episode of KFAF, during the gift card bid, there was a shot where Andy's credit card was actually visible, the number and the expiration date. So Andy had to call his card company and explain why he had to cancel it. Alongside that, Andy was also trying to switch his Instagram account over to a business account and it showed his phone number. Thankfully, he was able to clear it up before the episode finished. The boys then talk about what's been going on in the latest season of Fortnite and how they should get the team back together. The fine gentlemen open up and taste the new most stuffed Oreos, kind of giving a little preview of what's to come in Oreo Oration. Rounding out the show with the last topic, each member is telling about their worst nightmares. Andy has recurring dreams of not doing homework in class or being ill-prepared. Then Greg tells a really sad, vivid story of how Portillo dies. One that really not only affected Greg, but also the other hosts of the show. Nick tends to have dreams that really trigger his anxiety, such as not passing an exam or being ill-prepared for class, much like Andy. This finishes out the Kinda Funny podcast alongside this week's worth of Kinda Funny content. Well, everyone, that's been the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you were able to see something you didn't know about. Maybe you're going to go check out. Maybe you have a better idea of what went on last week with Kinda Funny. Now, before we leave, again, don't forget last week to participate in the fundraiser. So go on to patreon.com/kindafunny or patreon.com/kindafunnygames. Anything you can help out is going to be hugely helpful and beneficial to us, the community, as well as the Kinda Funny group themselves. Now, one more thing before we leave. As we talked about this week in Debatable, this is going to be Jared Petty's last week. I know he's finishing up some stuff currently, last episode of Gamescast and Kinda Funny Games Daily. He's leaving Kinda Funny, and I just wanted to take the time to thank Jared Petty for all he's done for Kinda Funny. I know he had a pretty crazy ride. He came in, started making content on his own. He had his own group of people supporting him, and he was welcomed into the Kinda Funny best friend community with open arms. So Jared, thank you so much for everything you've done for the Kinda Funny community. Your voice has been wonderful to hear, weekly, sometimes daily. It's been really great. I love your opinions. You've got such a unique view of not only video games, but the world in general. So to be able to allow us best friends to get a glimpse into your mind has been a real big treat. So again, I just want to thank you so much. Congratulations on your new position. I hope it brings you all of the happiness that you deserve, and just good luck in the future. Now, if you want to see more about Jared Petty, you can definitely go into patreon.com/JaredPetty. He's got a whole write-up on what's going to be going on and what he's going to be doing. So if you don't know or you're not in the loop, definitely check that out. Other than that, that's all I have for you today for Kinda Funny Weekly Review. So stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you next time.